Before I get started, some of you are probably wondering why this is under my playlist for movie reviews of 2015. Well, it's because I consider Selma a 2015 movie. Now, Selma is nominated for Best Motion Picture of 2014 for the Oscars, but it was released in January 2015. So for me, I consider it a 2015 movie. And if you don't agree, then, well, that's fine, but for me, it's just 2015. For me, anything released in 2015 should be a 2015 movie. Even if it was supposed to come out in December of 2014 and got pushed back to January. Which is also why I consider Inherent Vice, American Sniper, Paddington, and a few other movies 2015 movies. So just to clarify that before people are wondering why they're in the 2015 playlist, because I will be doing reviews of them eventually. In fact, I will be seeing American Sniper tomorrow, along with Woman in Black 2. That should be fun. Besides, it's movies that were meant for December that ended up coming in January of the next year that give us a reason to go to movies in January. I mean, this might be one of the best Januaries for movies in years. I mean, let's face it, we got American Sniper, Selma, Inherent Vice, and Paddington. That's some pretty big movies. Alright, but enough about that. I'm here to talk about Selma, and so let's get started. Alright, Selma was a big surprise for me. The first time I heard about it was the week that the Golden Globes announced their nominations. And when they were going through the nominations and I saw a movie called Selma several times, I wondered what the heck that movie is. So I looked it up on Rotten Tomatoes, and some critics had seen it early, so they had some reviews. And it was like at 100% at that moment. I thought, man, I gotta see what this movie's about. And I watched the trailer, found out it was Martin Luther King, and I realized, yeah, I'm gonna have to see this movie. This looks amazing. And I was glad one of our theaters got it, because sometimes I have 3 theaters in town, and they don't like to take risks with independent films or movies that seem less mainstream. Yeah, I was lucky to get Boyhood in Paramount, but it only lasted a week because they decided to kick that out of the movie theater and replace it with The Identical. Yeah, that had like, last time I looked at that, The Identical had like 4% on Rotten Tomatoes. I haven't even heard of it. I don't even know what it's about. It's just called The Identical. That's all I know. And Seth Green's in it. That's the only thing. That's the only knowledge I have of that movie. Okay, like I said, Selma is about Martin Luther King, and it is about this one particular major event in the civil rights movement. Okay, during this time in the civil rights movement, blacks had the right to vote. Unfortunately, certain states in the South were making up completely crazy rules that they had to follow in order to register to vote. And one great scene in that was when Oprah tries to register for voting. She fills out this form correctly and she hands it to him. So he looks at her and he tells her to recite the preamble. And he even asks, you know what the preamble is, right? And she recites it. Then he says, how many judges are in Alabama? And it's something like 57 or 67 or something crazy like that. So she answers, and she gets it correct, and he looks at her and he says, name them. Name like 57 judges? Are you freaking kidding me? So basically this whole movie is them trying to get the government to enforce their rights to vote, and by doing away with all these crazy, just ridiculous rules that they had to follow in order to even register. Like, one of them was you had to know a a registered voter, and you had to get them to sign like a voucher in order to get the right to vote. Unfortunately, all the registered voters were white people and white racists that wouldn't sign the voucher anyway, and so it was just, there's so many crazy things about it. Selma is a long movie, and if you're not into biopics or historical dramas, then it might be a little slow for you, but I was completely engaged almost the entire time. Selma shows all the politics involved, all the powers that are responsible for these marches and the civil rights movement, and you get it from all kinds of perspectives. It's easy for history books to say that he started a march all the way to Selma, but this movie, it shows everything that was involved for creating it, all the mistakes, all the ideas, and all just plain everything that went about making this march and all the politics involved, and it was very interesting. Also easy to forget with big civil rights movements, there's a lot more than just one group, which just makes sense because when we have a set goal, we as individuals and as humans, we have our own opinions on how to achieve that goal. So that leads to multiple ways of trying to get to that goal. And so Selma helps show that diversity by talking about Malcolm X, who's the polar opposite of Martin Luther King. They had Martin Luther King, of course, his movement, and they had even this small civil rights group that was in Selma before Martin Luther King, and Martin Luther King's group comes in, and the original group is a little hesitant because they're worried that the movement will remember Martin Luther King rather than the group that was originally in Selma. So it shows a little bit more of that dynamic and how people have their own opinions on how to go about this. And so whenever there's a big historical hero, this legend basically, it's always easy to forget that these people were humans. They are humans, and they have flaws, they have mistakes, they are more than just the events that define them as in history. And so what this movie does, it does show Martin Luther King's human side. It doesn't just show him going about this civil movement, this whole march to Selma to get the right to vote. It shows his family life and these constant death threats that the family keeps getting because of his speaking out for equal rights for blacks. And it shows the toll it takes on his wife when he's gone for all this time and constantly keeps getting in jail. And of course that helps us get these moments where we can relate to the character and we can see the human side and not just the legend and the historical figure that he is. And speaking of Martin Luther King, the actor playing him was phenomenal. And hopefully I'm pronouncing this right because I did look it up. I did look up his name and even looked up how to pronounce it. So hopefully Brad Pitt is right. I would assume so because he helped produce this movie. Yeah, I looked up a video of him pronouncing it. The actor's name is David Oyelowo. I'm not going to say it again because I'm worried that I'll screw it up, and I might have even screwed it up right now. But he was absolutely amazing in this movie, and it's a shame that he's not even nominated for an Oscar. He got nominated for Golden Globes at least. But yeah, when I watched this movie, I didn't grow up around Martin Luther King's days because I'm like, I'm 24. But when I watched Selma, I didn't see an actor acting to be Martin Luther King. I swear, when I watched it, I felt like I was watching Martin Luther King himself and not an actor playing him. He looked the part, he spoke the part, he did phenomenal, and it's definitely a breakthrough performance, that's for sure. So I have nothing but praise for Selma. It is an absolutely amazing movie, and if it's in your theater, I would strongly recommend it. It is definitely not as graphic or as brutal as 12 Years a Slave. It is definitely somewhere between that and The Butler when it comes to the brutality. It is a PG-13 movie, and that's probably why it's not. So it's not as uncomfortable. If people didn't want to see 12 Years a Slave because of that, then definitely see Selma. So the only issues I have of Selma is some of the slow motion. And when I watched it the first time in theaters, I didn't think much of it. The slow-mo it just made it more stylistic and more artistic movie. But as I let the movie set in for a week, I started thinking about the effects of this constant slow-mo during the brutal scenes. Now, there's this one scene that is important, and it's this total brutal where the officers are just beating poor innocent marchers, and it goes in super slow-mo, which honestly helps us see the whole picture. That's the good thing about it. The bad thing is it's not as impactful as it could have been if it was just normal speed. If you think about it, you don't really get the speed, or you can't really judge the force of the impacts when it's in slow motion. Obviously, they could if they do the rippling effect, but on the people's cheeks and stuff when the force is hit. But that times can become cheesy and a little just funny than actually impactful. That was kind of minor for that bridge scene. It didn't affect me that much. It's just as I was thinking about it later on, I realized it might not be as effective as it should be. But there is one slow-mo scene that, as I started thinking about slow-mo, I thought, you know what, there was one scene that was really that the slow motion was really not needed, and it's towards the beginning. I won't give too much away if you're going to see this movie, obviously, but the scene has to do with an explosion. That's all I'm going to say about that. So if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, and if you haven't seen it, you'll know what to look for. But there's this explosion scene where it just suddenly happens. It's fast speed, it's normal speed, and it's like shocking, and I leaped out of my seat a little bit because I wasn't expecting it. And then as soon as the explosion happens, after the suddenness of it, it goes into slow-mo. And that's fine, but unfortunately the slow-mo and the scene that you're seeing, all you see is dust from the explosion, and I believe someone's shoe, and with their foot still in it. It's not like a severed foot or anything like that. It's nothing graphic like that. This is a PG-13 movie. I'm sure her foot was still attached to her, but all you see is part of the foot in the screen, and then the rest of her is just off camera. And so you just see this dust, and then this like foot like coming down or up or something like that, and it's just going in super slow-mo, and that's all you really see, which is fine if it didn't take so long. But the slow motion scene was like really long, and all the shock and effect that I had from the sudden explosion, I quickly recover from it because the slow motion took so long. And by the time it shows the dust clearing and the unfortunate innocent bodies dead, I had recovered from the initial shock and awe. And that's the only scene I could criticize. The rest of the movie is pretty much amazing, phenomenal. It's definitely going to be one of those movies that's my favorite of the year for a few months for sure. Unless American Sniper or Paddington is freaking amazing, then I think Selma is going to be one of my favorite films of 2015 for a couple months at least. So Selma is definitely a movie that I'm hard pressed to want to give it 5 stars, and it's definitely a movie deserving of it if you had no problems with the film. Unfortunately, my rule is even if there's a minor flaw or a minor thing that I've noticed or didn't like about the film, then I have to give it 4.5 stars. And like I said, it's only because of some of the slow motion not being as impactful as it could have been, and that one scene with the explosion that took a little too long and was unnecessary and was in slow motion unnecessarily. So if you have Selma in your theaters, I strongly recommend it. It is definitely one of the best films to see in January. That's positive. That's just fact, actually. So if you've seen Selma, what do you think about it? I'm open to discussions of the movie. Just comment below, and this is just my opinion.